In mid-2026, a reroute will potentially send thousands of visitors right through Colorado City, Arizona, a small town that for decades has been known for polygamy and controversial church leaders.
There's a specific kind of dread that doesn't come with warning signs. Not flashing lights, not crime scene tape, not a boarded-up building that screams, "Stay away." No, the dread I'm talking about walks up to you wearing a neighborly smile. It lives behind a freshly painted fence. It hides inside a community that looks from every angle like the perfect place to raise a family. These are the places that disturb people long after they've left. Not because of what they saw, but because of the feeling they couldn't shake. That something beneath the surface wasn't right. That the smiles lasted half a beat too long. That the questions were never quite answered directly. That somehow everyone agreed about everything. Today we're going deep inside America's creepiest cult towns. 10 real places, some you've heard of, some you haven't. All of them hiding systems built on control, belief, and obedience, in plain sight. And fair warning, by the end of this video, you're going to look at perfectly ordinary towns a little differently. Before we go, if this is the kind of deep dive content you want more of, hit subscribe. We cover everything from twisted history to the stories most channels skip over. Okay, let's go. Number 1. Short Creek, Colorado City, Arizona, and Hilldale, Utah. Here's a question for you. What if a town was secretly a theocracy, and the government running it answered not to voters, but to a prophet? That's not a hypothetical. That's Short Creek. Straddling the Arizona-Utah border, Colorado City and Hilldale look like two quiet desert towns near the Red Rock Cliffs of Zion National Park. But for the better part of 90 years, they were something far more controlled, run top to bottom by the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the FLDS. The FLDS broke from the mainstream Mormon church in the early 20th century when the LDS Church renounced polygamy. The FLDS didn't. Followers settled in this remote corner of the desert specifically because the isolation made enforcement impossible. For decades, that worked. Church leadership controlled the police department. They ran the schools. And through a land trust called the United Effort Plan, the church technically owned most of the homes. That meant housing wasn't something you purchased. It was something assigned to you and taken from you the moment you fell out of favor. And then Warren Jeffs took over. Jeffs became leader after his father's death in 2002, and things got darker fast. He ordered children pulled out of public schools. Basketball hoops were removed from properties. He dictated what followers ate, how they spent their time, who they married, and who they didn't. Between 2001 and 2006, up to 400 young men were estimated to have been expelled from the community, cast out for minor infractions, many of them homeless and completely unprepared for the outside world. Marriages, including those involving underage girls, were arranged by Jeffs personally. He reportedly had more than 70 wives. In 2006, Jeffs made the FBI's 10 most wanted list and was arrested. In 2011, he was convicted in Texas of sexually assaulting a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old and sentenced to life in prison, where he remains today, still reportedly issuing directives to followers from his cell. Visitors to Short Creek during the Jeffs era described something deeply unsettling. Curtains moving behind windows, eyes tracking you from inside homes. A pervasive sense that you were not supposed to be there. The haunting part? For a long time, they were right. The police worked for the church. You weren't supposed to be there. Today, the towns look remarkably different. Court supervision ended ahead of schedule. A winery opened. Soccer games are played on weekends. The former FLDS compound built for Warren Jeffs has been transformed into a hotel called, appropriately, Zion's Most Wanted. But as one former member put it, it's going to take several generations to recover. Number 2. Eldorado, Texas. The compound in the desert. In 2003, a mysterious group quietly purchased nearly 1,700 acres of remote West Texas scrubland near the small town of Eldorado. They told the locals it was going to be a hunting retreat. Nobody believed them, but nobody knew what to do either. What the FLDS built on that land was called the Yearning for Zion Ranch, the YFZ Ranch. And by the time it was finished, it was a self-contained world. A temple, housing, generators, gardens, a grain silo, a stone quarry, dozens of buildings constructed without permits. Inside, roughly 700 people lived under total control, cut off from the outside. The ranch was Warren Jeffs' answer to increasing scrutiny in Arizona and Utah. A fresh start, somewhere new where they thought they could operate without interference. They were wrong. On April 3, 2008, Texas law enforcement raided the ranch after a phone call from someone claiming to be a 16-year-old girl being abused inside. It later emerged that call may have been made by a woman in Colorado who had never set foot on the property. But what investigators found when they got inside made the original allegation almost irrelevant. 53 girls between 14 and 17. 31 of them had children or were pregnant. Investigators found a handwritten bishop's record documenting arranged marriages between underage girls and much older men. 2 of those girls were 12 when they were ordered to marry. 3 were 13. Ultimately, 416 children were removed from the property, the largest child custody action in United States history. 11 FLDS men received prison sentences. The state of Texas seized the YFZ property in 2014. Today, it's used as a military and law enforcement training facility. Something built in the desert to hide a system of control. And for years, it almost worked. Number 3. Antelope, Oregon. The town that was taken. This one starts with a guru, a fleet of Rolls Royces, and a tiny Oregon town that woke up one day to find it had new neighbors. In 1981, an Indian mystic known as Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, later called Osho, purchased 64,000 acres of land in Wasco County, Oregon. His followers, called Rajneeshis, poured in from around the world. They built an entire city from scratch, Rajneeshpuram, complete with its own post office, airstrip, restaurant, and commune for thousands of people. They wore the same colors, shades of red, orange, and maroon. They lived under the same system. And they had a plan. The nearest town was Antelope, population 75. The Rajneeshis moved members in and registered them to vote. Overnight, they became the majority. They won local elections. They renamed the town Rajneeshpuram. The few original residents who stayed felt like strangers in their own community. But the Rajneeshis wanted more. To take control of Wasco County, they needed to win seats on the county court in the 1984 election. And they were worried about losing. So they came up with a plan to eliminate the competition. Not at the ballot box. In September 1984, followers of Rajneesh contaminated the salad bars of 10 restaurants in the Dalles, the largest city in Wasco County. With Salmonella typhimurium bacteria they had cultured in a secret laboratory on the commune. The goal was to make as many voters as possible too sick to leave the house on election day. 751 people became ill. 45 were hospitalized. It remains the largest bioterrorist attack in United States history, larger than the anthrax attacks of 2001. Nobody died. And crucially, the Rajneeshi candidates still lost. For over a year, investigators believed it was simply a foodborne illness outbreak. It was only when the commune collapsed under the weight of internal power struggles that defectors confessed to the plan. Investigators later found evidence that the group had also considered poisoning the local water supply and had looked into acquiring HIV and typhoid bacteria. Rajneesh was deported from the United States in 1985 for immigration violations. His personal secretary, Ma Anand Sheila, who orchestrated the attacks, served 29 months in prison before being released on parole and deported to Germany. The town of Antelope quietly went back to its original name. The salad bars never quite felt the same. Number 4. Marshall, California, the commune by the bay. Here's a story that starts beautifully and ends with a rattlesnake in someone's mailbox. In 1958, a recovering alcoholic named Charles Dederick founded a drug rehabilitation program in Santa Monica called Synanon. The idea was revolutionary for the time. Addicts helping addicts, living communally, holding each other accountable through intense group sessions called The Game. Celebrities visited. Politicians praised it. The state of California sent troubled teenagers there for treatment. By 1968, Synanon had grown so large that it moved its headquarters to a sprawling property in Marshall, along the Tamales Bay coastline in Marin County, one of the most beautiful stretches of land in California. And then, slowly, it became something monstrous. Dederick stopped allowing members to leave. Children were separated from their parents and raised communally in what was called the hatchery. Members were required to shave their heads as a sign of loyalty. Men were pressured to undergo vasectomies. Couples were broken up and reassigned to new partners by Dederick's order. An armed paramilitary group called the Imperial Marines was formed to enforce discipline, inside the commune and outside it. Former members who tried to leave were tracked down and beaten. One man's skull was fractured in 1977 for attempting to free his own child. By 1978, Synanon had declared itself a religion, had acquired more firearms than any other organization in California's history, and had compiled a hit list of enemies. At the top of that list was a lawyer named Paul Morantz, who had spent years exposing the group and winning legal judgments against it. One October afternoon in 1978, he reached into his mailbox and was struck by a 4.5-foot rattlesnake that 2 Synanon members had placed inside it with its rattles removed. Morantz survived. Dederick pleaded no contest and was forced to resign. The IRS eventually stripped the group of its tax-exempt status, and Synanon formally dissolved in 1991. The Marshall property was taken over by the California State Park System. In 2023, it reopened as a luxury hotel, Lodge at Marconi, with sweeping views over Tamales Bay and a history the brochure can barely contain. A beautiful place with a dark, dark past. Number 5. Crestone, Colorado, where belief becomes a business. Crestone is different from everything we've covered so far. There's no single leader, no court cases, no FBI raids, no rattlesnakes. And yet Crestone makes this list for a reason that's arguably more relevant today than any of the others. Nestled at the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in southern Colorado, Crestone is one of the most concentrated spiritual communities in the United States. Within a few square miles, you'll find Buddhist meditation centers, Hindu ashrams, Carmelite hermitages, Zen temples, and dozens of other retreat communities, representing more than 30 different spiritual traditions. People come here searching for meaning, for healing, for answers to questions they can't articulate. And many of them find something genuinely valuable. But Crestone also sits at the intersection of 2 things that can quietly become dangerous: spiritual seeking and social isolation. Former visitors and residents have described communities where leaving felt like a personal failure, where you'd invested so much of your identity in a belief system that stepping away meant losing your community, your purpose, and yourself. No single organization is responsible. That's the point. Crestone represents not a cult, but an environment. A place where spiritual influence can accumulate slowly, where dependence can be dressed up as devotion, where the line between a genuine seeker and a controlled follower is blurrier than anyone would like to admit. Number 6. Sedona, Arizona, the spiritual marketplace. Same energy as Crestone, different price tag. Sedona is undeniably one of the most visually stunning places in the United States. The red rock formations are extraordinary. The light is extraordinary. And for decades, the city has cultivated a reputation as a spiritual destination, built around the idea that powerful vortexes of energy exist at specific points in the landscape. Today, Sedona has hundreds of practitioners offering healing sessions, psychic readings, past life regressions, aura photography, sound baths, and energy work. A multi-million-dollar industry built around belief. For many people, the experience is genuinely transformative. But what concerns researchers of high-control communities is a pattern that shows up repeatedly in Sedona. Tourists who arrive for a weekend and stay for months. People who hand over large sums of money to practitioners who create dependency through cycles of revelation and crisis. A spiritual marketplace that rewards commitment and punishes skepticism. In 2009, motivational speaker James Arthur Ray held a spiritual warrior retreat outside Sedona. As part of the event, participants entered a sweat lodge that reached lethal temperatures. Ray was convicted of negligent homicide after 3 people died. No vortex, just a tent, and a man who told people they had to push through the pain. Sedona is still beautiful, but it's worth asking what you're paying for and who profits from your search. Number 7. Mount Shasta, California. If you want to understand how geography becomes mythology and how mythology becomes control, Mount Shasta is your case study. At 14,179 feet, Mount Shasta in Northern California has been surrounded by legends for centuries. Native traditions hold the mountain as sacred. In the 20th century, a layer of modern mythology accumulated on top. Stories of Lemurian civilizations living inside the mountain, interdimensional gateways, extraterrestrial contact, hidden masters. Because of these stories, Mount Shasta has become a gathering point for groups who offer access to the mountain's mysteries for a price. The structure is familiar. Follow the teachings. Trust the guide. Commit fully. Don't question. And once belief has reached the level of devotion, once the mountain itself has become the authority, it becomes very difficult to step away without feeling like you've abandoned something sacred. No criminal convictions, no FBI raids, but a pattern of dependence that researchers of high-control groups would recognize immediately. Number 8. Taos, New Mexico. Taos built its identity on freedom. Artists have flocked here for over a century, drawn by the light, the landscape, the absence of rules. Georgia O'Keeffe lived not far from here. D.H. Lawrence wrote nearby, "The whole mythology of the place is about creative liberation." But even in communities built on individuality, power consolidates, influence concentrates, gatekeepers emerge. What makes Taos worth including in this conversation isn't one specific group or incident. It's a pattern that shows up in creative and countercultural communities everywhere. The slow formation of an in-group whose approval controls access to opportunities, community, and identity. In Taos, that dynamic has played out in art communities, spiritual circles, and intentional living groups alike. The freedom promised on arrival gradually reveals itself to have conditions attached. Not a cult, but a reminder that control doesn't only wear religious robes. Number 9. St. George, Utah. St. George is the most straightforward entry on this list, and possibly the most thought-provoking. This is a real, thriving city of about 100,000 people, deeply shaped by LDS faith. Community structures are strong, social networks are tight, shared values are visible everywhere. For the majority of residents, this creates exactly what they want: stability, belonging, a community that looks after its own. But for people outside those structures, non-members, former members, LGBTQ+ residents, newcomers, the same tightly woven network can feel like a wall. Business relationships, social invitations, and community support that flow naturally between members can be essentially inaccessible to outsiders. St. George isn't a cult town. No one is trapped. People leave freely. But it's a vivid illustration of how powerful a unified belief system can be in shaping every dimension of daily life, and how that same power can make people on the margins feel invisible. Number 10. Clear Lake, California. We end at Clear Lake, a beautiful area in Northern California's Lake County, Known for wellness retreats and spiritual centers set against the backdrop of California's largest natural lake. Many of these retreats are exactly what they appear to be, places of genuine rest and reflection. And yet, researchers who study high-control group dynamics point to a specific cluster of techniques that show up across different contexts when healthy retreat becomes harmful control. Physical isolation from normal life. Intense, structured daily schedules that leave little room for independent thought. Emotional openness facilitated in a controlled environment. The breaking down of personal boundaries as a step toward transformation. The pressure to go further, to spend more, commit more, surrender more, as proof of sincerity. None of these things, in isolation, constitute abuse. But in the wrong hands, in the hands of a leader who mistakes their own authority for wisdom, they become tools. Clear Lake is a reminder that the final entry on this list doesn't have a name. It's a set of conditions, and those conditions can appear anywhere. So what connects Colorado City to Clear Lake? Rajneeshpuram to Mount Shasta? A prophet with 70 wives to a spiritual retreat on a Californian lakeside? It's not crime, necessarily. And it's not always violence. It's something subtler. It's the slow surrender of questioning. The communities where doubt is dressed up as disloyalty. The environments where belonging comes with conditions, and leaving feels like failure. What makes these places creepy isn't blood on the walls. It's the architecture of belief. Invisible, load-bearing, almost impossible to dismantle from the inside. The most unsettling thing about every place on this list? They all had people who stayed, who believed genuinely, fully, sometimes beautifully, in something that was using them. And the most honest thing I can say at the end of this video is that none of us are as immune to that as we'd like to think. The need to belong, to believe, to be part of something meaningful. That's not a weakness. It's human. It's just also the thing that every single one of these places exploited. If you made it this far, thank you. If this kind of deep dive storytelling is what you're here for, subscribe and leave a comment below. Which of these places surprised you most? We'll see you in the next one.